anything that can be done to reconcile Prince Harry with his father would be a good thing on both sides. And I would imagine Prince William would understand that. It doesn't mean he's going to come back, doesn't mean he's going to take part in royal engagements again, doesn't mean he's going to be of any use.
Hi, all. Kinsey Schofield here. Welcome to Crowning Conflict. This week, we're examining Prince George's future at Eton College, a school that has educated prime ministers, aristocrats, and generations of royals. Joining me is acclaimed royal biographer, and you graduated from Eton. There's no better person that I could ever imagine talking to, Hugo Vickers, and you're going to offer us a unique perspective on what awaits the young prince and why Eton remains such an influential institution in British life. Before we go into that, we had so much fun when I was in the UK together. Thank you so much for spending time with me while I was there. Order of the Garter was the most unbelievable, beautiful display. I've said it a million times, singing the hymns with the British royal family, prayer with the British royal family. I'd never imagined in my life that I would be privileged enough to do things like that. Thank you so much. There have been some new headlines surrounding Prince William's work ethic. And it's kind of like same old story. They've kind of bullied him about this over the years. But you saw Prince William in action over the last few weeks. He's everywhere, whether it's London Climate Week, whether it's Ascot, whether it's Order of the Garter, trooping. What is your opinion about Prince William's work ethic?
Well, I've never had any concerns about his ethic at all. He appears when he's required. He does his various engagements. There was a time, of course, when his wife was very ill, when we didn't see so much of him, because guess what he was doing? He was looking after her. And there was a very significant moment, which was when he did not appear at King Constantine's memorial service, where he was meant to read a lesson. And in the olden days, I think a member of the royal family would have said, look, listen, this is she just got her diagnosis that morning, saying, look, this is but really bad news, but I've just got to go and read a lesson. I'll be away for 40 minutes. No, he didn't. He stayed with her, and I admire him for that. And I also admire him very much, him and Catherine, for what they're doing with those three children. Because the late Queen, Elizabeth II, had 10 years of blissful childhood, which really set her up. And I think that's what they're doing for those children. They're going to school matches, they're driving them to school in the mornings, they're taking a big part in their family life and their education. And all this will pay off in the long run. We will not be hearing that terrible expression, the dysfunctional royal family. So I'm absolutely, totally happy about whatever Prince William does. He is doing still quite a lot. And, the time will come when he becomes king, and then, of course, he'll have to do more. And he
Right.
knows that.
Yeah, that's such a good point about Queen Elizabeth. I hadn't even thought about that. She did. She had that
Yeah.
blissful childhood with her sister where they had the freedom to be curious and silly and, you know, just free and innocent, which
Yes. And there was this.
we see that with Louis, don't we? With Sweet Prince Louis.
We do, and I'm just when I did my book about the Queen, I found a particular a moment when she and Princess Margaret were at the zoo, and they were watching a penguin, and he was kind of waddling along, imitating his keeper,
Mhm.
and that was sort of July 1935. And shortly afterwards, real life crept in with the death of the grandfather, George V, which upset her very much. And then, of course, 11 months later, her favorite uncle abdicated and went into the past tense. And she realized that she was going to have to be queen one day. Um, so childhood never lasts forever, but in those moments of childhood, they should be savored, and they do give people a wonderful background for whatever comes later.
Is there an ulterior motive when we see some of these reports about Prince William's lack of um, schedule or work shy wills? Do you even know what that would be? Is it just an attempt to stir the pot because things are a little too comfortable or things? Because one of the things that stood out to me in Spare was how Harry writes about how alarmed he is after Prince Philip's funeral. He's on the Windsor estate waiting for his father and brother, who appear to be a few minutes late. And they walk up together, and he is startled by how united they seem. He is startled by, in his in his version, which is always questionable, how these two people that used to butt heads are approaching him as a unit, as one entity, and that catches him off guard, that they have bonded so fiercely in the last few years after his absence.
I thought actually after Prince Philip's funeral, if you remember, that William and Harry kind of walked up together, and Catherine sort of seemed to bring them together, and then almost sort of stepped back and left them together. I remember people thinking, well, that's amazing. And then, of course, if I don't trust much that in Spare, but if they did go to the Frogmore graveyard after that and have a chat, they were all chatting together. So I'm not sure his memory is very accurate, actually.
And the poor King Charles says to him, "Don't make my last few
Yes.
years a
I think
nightmare." Basically, I'm, that's not the exact
I,
word.
given that he's coming over here shortly, people keep asking me, will they meet? Well, I mean, I'm sure they probably will meet, and actually, anything that can be done to effect a personal reconciliation between King Charles and his son is good for two reasons. One, to stop it making it miserable for the father, and also because if the king dies and Prince Harry has behaved in a sort of truculent way and they're not on good terms, he'll be carrying even more emotional baggage around him than he's already got around his neck.
That would be devastating. Is
Yep.
it not? Is it not at all a betrayal to Prince William, who seems to be setting those boundaries when it comes to Harry? It was
I
Harry,
don't think so.
Meghan's ally, that accused Catherine and the king of racism in the Dutch version of Endgame. Meghan's still, kind of perpetuating animosity by sending a Catherine critic a goodie bag in the mail. Somebody that sits on TikTok harassing the Princess of Wales. Meghan sends him flower sprinkles and chaos. I mean, is it not a betrayal to Prince William, who, if the king doesn't nip Harry and Meghan's commercial use of the royal brand in the bud, that's something he has to deal with down the line, and that's not very fair. I mean, we say it's not fair that the king has to deal with the inherited Andrew problem.
Well, I think that, anything that can be done to reconcile Prince Harry with his father would be a good thing on both sides. And I would imagine Prince William would understand that. It doesn't mean he's going to come back, doesn't mean he's going to take part in royal engagements again, doesn't mean he's going to be of any use, because anything he does over here is always in conflict with what Prince William is doing. You've seen it a million times. Prince Harry's here. He's gone to, say, he's gone to a football match. Prince William is doing nothing or something, and they use it to get at him because it's this awful thing that the people who commission these articles, they get all these clicks on it, and so they think, oh, people are interested. We must produce more stuff about the tension between the two brothers. But I think they're all fairly grown up, and I think anyone, it would be miserable if a person blamed his brother for trying to make civil terms with his father. I mean, it's not going to be a threat to him in any way at all. So I don't think that's a problem. I mean, I do think it's a problem. I don't think that William and Harry are going to reconcile, and why should they at this point? And that's much more difficult because the hurt is deeper.
Right. I would have a very hard time forgetting about some of those things. Catherine's just been such a perfect example of how to marry into the royal family right, how to behave, how to educate yourself on and respect the culture, educate yourself on the tradition, respect the culture. And it just felt like a low blow, hit after hit. But I know you love her as much as I do. So, or you respect her, I should say. You're not as American as I am with the loves and the hugs, but yeah, I know you respect her as much as I do. So you're not arguing that. You're just saying from a family perspective, this
Yeah.
needs to be cleaned up, and that doesn't mean that Harry's going to be welcomed back with open arms, and we should worry about seeing him regularly.
No, exactly. It's all on a personal level, and certainly he would be no use at all as a working member of the royal family now, because it would just be in competition with the more important work that they're doing. And the difference, of course, as I've said many times before, is that our royal family are working for the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth, and those two are working for themselves.
Yeah, very unappealing. Let's jump into some an exploration basically of Eton, because I don't know Eton, but you know Eton inside and out. Talk to me about your life at Eton, and is it hard to get in? Were you excited or were you nervous when you got in? What were your expectations as a little boy, knowing you were going off to this school?
Well, I should point out I'm wearing my old Etonian tie, which was given to me when I left the school in 1970 by a military knight, Major Clough, who sent out for it. He was bedridden at the time. He was 93. So I was being given this tie by a man who was born in 1876. That's quite fun, isn't it?
It is. I love that.
And basically, yeah. So first of all, I was meant to go to Radley, which is another of those schools, but luckily, a boy called Gunning failed his common entrance, and I was plucked off the general list. And so went to a house, and Gunning joined us later, and so I was excited to go there. And of course, yes, I was certainly daunted because you just move into a completely different world. First of all, we dressed like penguins. We were wearing black morning coats in memory of George III. There was a funny little white tie that you tied. Most people just flicked it over and stuck it down the back of their stiff collar. I actually always tied it because I'm that sort of person. Um, you have this sort of tea with the housemaster, a man you may have perhaps just met once, but you certainly don't know him, and you realize that you're going to be in his guardianship for the next 5 years, and then your trunk clatters up the stairs and you go to your room. The next morning, the door swings open and a boy's maid comes in because in those days we had a basin and she would pour boiling water into the basin and you had to, as it were, wash your face in the basin and then do your teeth afterwards. Otherwise, you'd be washing your face in toothpaste, you know. And then you came down to breakfast, and it was all very alarming, the whole thing. You were in a house. I was in actually a very nice house. My housemaster was a sort of Edward Heath type figure. He was a bachelor. He had pushed all his skills to the limit. He was a mathematician, a rowing man, a bassoon player. He used to play three-dimensional chess with the collegers, who were the clever ones, the boys on scholarships. And sometimes he won because you'd be three people playing, and they were so busy trying to fight each other that he slipped a move in. Don't ask me how to play three-dimensional chess. I did try. It was quite difficult. You're taken, round you. The great thing about Eton is you have your own room from day one. So you have this kind of independence. Normally, it starts off as a very small room. In fact, your bed may well be a rather uncomfortable metal object, which you have to put two straps over of the mattress and put it up against the wall because you don't have much space. It's also your study. You can decorate it as you like, put all your family pictures on the walls or
Do you
pictures of the.
remember that Prince Harry had a picture of Halle Berry on his wall?
Well, exactly. And I certainly in my day, I remember being quite surprised by some of the pictures that you saw when you opened cupboard doors. You know, there were magazines such as Playboy were very much around in those days, and boys will be boys.
Boys will be boys. I also think that Prince William had like the 90s supermodels on his wall. And then at one point, Princess Diana, he came home to Kensington Palace, and Princess Diana had surprised him with some of the 90s supermodels on his wall at Eton, like in the living room. I
Well,
mean,
that's
what a life.
that's amazing. Yes, I mean, a man of my age came up to me the other day at an exhibition and said, "Don't worry, I'm not going to set fire to your aunt's election poster because I had my aunt. She was a member of Parliament. I had her election poster on the wall, and he probably thought that that was pretentious, and so he set fire to a bit of it in the corner, which made me very angry. And there were all sorts of things like that. But of course, you won't be surprised to hear I had pictures of the royal family all over my wall and
Oh,
pictures of the
Hugo, I
Queen.
love you.
And I actually, of course, the other thing, which was that some years later, 50 years on, I was asked to go back and make a speech to the Leavers dinner, for 50 years. And I said, well, you must have asked somebody who actually went through the school making no impression on it at all, either academically or in sport. I spent my whole time going up the hill to St. George's Chapel and eventually became a guide showing tourists around on Sunday afternoons. And that's where I started all these years ago. So that
Yeah.
was a great relief.
Yeah.
Uh, but it is a good school. It offers a lot. If you're a musician, the music schools are unbelievable. I have been back since, and the quality of of the film studios and the equipment and the art school and things. It's fantastic. I mean, the school was always very much ahead of the other schools. We had language laboratories before they were popular in other schools, that sort of thing.
Prince William has described Eton as a place that gave him structure during a very public adolescence, a sense of normality within an abnormal life, friendships that were important and long lasting. Harry has spoken, well, and we can get into that a little bit later, but Harry has made it sound like his Eton experience wasn't 100%. But for the most part, Prince William has expressed a lot of positive memories about his experience at Eton. And he still runs with a lot of those individuals that he became friends with then. So, I mean, I think that that says a lot that he has managed to continue on with some of those relationships, or that that was important to him. Eton was this playground for some of the UK's most influential leaders. And I do think that it's interesting to hear some of these stories.
Well, yes, but I think also remember, it's of course architecturally, it's rather wonderful. It's got amazing playing fields. It had things like debating societies. I mean, a great number of different societies. I was secretary of the School Heraldic and Genealogical Society.
Oh.
It has wonderful music. You can sing in the choir. You can sing in the in the school concerts. It has acting. You house plays are put on, school plays are put on. Also, by the way, when you're secretary of a school society, you can write to people, famous people, and they will come down to the school. I mean, I wrote to all sorts of people and invited them down, and a schoolmaster would give them dinner and they'd come and address in my case, the Heraldry Society. But if it was a political society, you would get Harold Macmillan, you would get all sorts of people coming to the school. And so in that respect, it was amazing. And, I think the greatest thing that probably you get is this thing that it encourages individuality, so that if there's a spark of interest there, it will be encouraged, and then people can learn to be themselves. Now, as for Prince William, what's particularly interesting, of course, is that he was there at the time when his mother, first of all, did the Panorama interview, and secondly, also still there, when she was killed in the car accident. And he had a very, very good housemaster called Andrew Gailey. And Andrew Gailey, I don't think I'm betraying too many secrets, but said to somebody, well, actually to a member of the family, he's like a boy with a huge weight lifted off his shoulder, not because he didn't love his mother, of course he did, but he was probably terrified what was going to happen to her, what she was going to do next. It was a terrible situation. But he, Prince William, got very good academic results the year after his mother died, and went on to St Andrews. And that was a huge tribute to a wonderful housemaster who saw him through what would have been a very difficult time for anybody, and a particularly difficult time for a boy in the public eye. So maybe Prince Harry didn't get on so well. And of course, one of the things is that,
Well, he tends to focus on the negative
well, yes,
in
but
general.
what I would say is, you see, that they would have let him into the school when a boy of his academic prowess would not have got in, on the grounds that you want to give him as good an education as possible. So I can see that he might have found it quite hard to keep up with some of the other boys, and that might have been a bit of a struggle.
Right. I also remember Prince William talking about after the death. I always thought that this was so sweet. After the death of his mother, and I imagine it's Andrew that presented him with this. There were thousands upon thousands of letters written to him at Eton, and he speaks about his somebody presenting him with these bags and bags and bags of mail. And I remember wondering at the time when I was watching him discuss that, how difficult that might have been for a teenage boy to receive. I mean, it's nice, but also, does it feel overwhelming to receive thousands of pieces of mail to your school, which is like your sanctuary, your little escape, about your mother and how much she meant to these people who, in a lot of cases, were strangers to him.
Pretty much all of them, I should think, were strangers, pretty
Mm-hmm.
much. And
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so. I think that again, the nice thing about the other Eton boys would be that they would respect him. They wouldn't treat him as a sort of global star. They wouldn't bully him in the way that Prince Charles was bullied at Gordonstoun because he was a prince. You never really knew. I say this. Only discovered later the different backgrounds from which the people that I knew came from. Some of them were there on scholarship, some of them perhaps lived in little houses and had done extremely well and got there. Others lived in amazing estates, and others were. We had our full share of sort of princes of Ethiopia and other places, people like that, and you just kind of like there they were, and nobody worried about it too much, and that must have been very refreshing, I think. I don't know whether Prince William would have been given all these sacks of mail or whether they would have been kept away from him because he wouldn't have been able to get into his room, I don't suppose,
Well,
otherwise,
he
if they.
he's he says that they did give it to him in a documentary about Diana, but I suspect for his mental health and for his safety that someone went through them prior to handing them over and just gave him the ones that they felt were appropriate for him in that time in his life.
I would hope so, certainly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
how important is it? You just mentioned this about all of the different backgrounds. How important is it for a future king like Prince George to live alongside boys from different backgrounds and perspectives? Or do you think in his position, he might not realize, because everyone's treated equally, that he's dealing with some scholarship kids and how important is it for him to be around, which I think he has been all of his upbringing, really. In a unique way, I think he's different from Prince William in that way.
Well, I think yes, I think that he will encounter lots of different types of boys at Eton. Inevitably, there've been the you might be surprised to hear the odd journalist who said it's shocking that he's going to a privileged school like that. He ought to be sent to, the local school. Well, no, no. Give him the best education possible. Instill into him certain sort of qualities of leadership and independence and things like that. And Eden is sort of, I don't know how to put this, it's sort of a great leveler in a way, sort of moments of pomposity would be sat upon. If he got out of hand, he would be steered, I think, more to something, more reasonable. That's all I can just say is from what I remember. I think you go in there as a little boy and you come out as a sort of, I don't know, sort of young man, potentially a leader of men, which he will one day be. Because you are given a lot of responsibility as you go up through the school. My father said to me, when you arrive at the school, everything you do is wrong. By the time you leave, everything you do is right.
Wow.
You are running sort of elements of this house life. And I mean, I was, I think, secretary of the school musical society, and you got people to come and do the concerts, and you put notices up on the board, and you dealt with all those things. You do deal with a lot of issues, which is rather interesting.
Yeah.
I'm sure other schools do that as well, but
I know, but we're talking about Eton because that's where Prince George is going.
yeah.
Yeah.
And also, the thing was that unfortunately Prince Philip sent Prince Charles to Gordonstoun, which we know he hated.
Right.
And one of the reasons he did it was to get him away from, the insidious cream teas that the Queen Mother would be serving at Royal Lodge, which is not that far away on a Sunday afternoon. Well, Prince William and Prince Harry really enjoyed going to see their great-grandmother and taking their friends, and all that was good. I mean, we have Windsor Castle, so close, and Windsor. And that's great.
Mhm.
And then you might ask me about security. Well, because we all dressed the same, it's quite difficult. Okay, a clever paparazzi photographer could probably pick Prince George out of the crowd, but it didn't seem to ever happen very much. It was very much a moratorium on photographing William and Harry. They would do a photo call the first day, and that was it. And then the rest would be discouraged. And probably the school grounds would be quite well monitored as well, because they would have obviously had protection officers with them.
Oh, what was the biggest adjustment you faced when you arrived at Eton and that George might face too?
Well, I think at that age, you were sort of left on your own to cope. You had to find your way around. I suppose we were getting dressed on our own, but this extraordinary clothes that we had to wear, we had to maneuver and things. And then you see each division room, classroom, was in a different place. You didn't, if you were in Form 3, let's say, you didn't have a Form 3 classroom, you went to the masters. The masters had their own classroom. So you could be moving around a lot in the daytime and you had to get there on time.
Oh
So there's a lot of things like that going on. We also had early morning school, by the way, 7:30 in the morning sometimes,
my gosh,
before breakfast.
that's
And
hard.
that's hard, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I'm very glad not to be there now, but I didn't hate being there, and also I think if just really lucky to have gone to such a great school with such a incredible history and tradition and backdrop, going back all those generations.
I agree. What aspects of Eton life do you think he will enjoy the most? We don't know a lot about his personality. So, that's kind of, you're talking about theater club and all of these things. I guess he'll find his niche. I guess he'll find his passion perhaps through the next few years.
I know he loves cricket and he'll have plenty
Right.
of opportunity to play cricket there because when you go to the school in the summer, you're either what's called a dry bob or a wet bob. And if you're a dry bob, you play cricket. And if you're a wet bob, you get into a ridiculously narrow boat and try and row it up the River Thames. God, I hated it.
You pointed that. Yeah, you pointed when we went to dinner around there one time. You pointed
Yeah.
at the river and you were like, here's what we used to have to do.
Yes, yeah, it's absolutely awful. I became what's called a slack bob as quickly as possible, whereby I could go to the swimming pool and swim and read a book.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned some of the high profile people that have gone to Eton. Can you name some off the top of your head who my audience might recognize?
Yes, well, of course, David Cameron and Boris Johnson, people like Anthony Eden and Harold Macmillan. It's produced a great number of prime ministers and a great number of very, very famous people. Actually, I was interested in looking down the list to see that sort of actors like Hugh Laurie and people
Mm.
like that were at
Oh
Eton.
yeah.
Yeah, lots of them.
What
So
lessons can Eton teach a future monarch that can't be learned from private tutors or palace advisors? I mean, there's a reason why royals are so attracted to this institution.
Well, I suppose it's like, it's been there for such a long time and it's developed slowly over the decades and the centuries to what it is today. So it's got a fairly polished agenda. I think that's probably what it is. It's all quite subtle.
Mm.
Um, but those lessons that are learnt, I think are learnt, instinctively in a strange way, in a
Yeah.
funny way.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was very grown up life. As I say, I was corresponding with people in the real world. When I went up to St. George's Chapel, I was showing tourists around. It's the first time I met the Queen was in St. George's Chapel during those years. I met Field Marshal Slim and all the other people who came to St. George's Chapel. So I was exposed to, very interesting people. And the schoolmasters themselves were fascinating. I mean, my classical tutor, because you're given a housemaster and then you have a tutor who takes an interest in your education, the educational side. He had been taught by G.K. Chesterton, did I but know it. I mean, how lucky was I, to have that, there's that
Exactly.
extraordinary tradition. And of course, some people who really got involved in school life could take part in debating societies and the political society, and would you know when you look at because actually when I went to the Oxford Union the other day, I know Oxford's a little bit later, and you looked at all those group photographs, and you thought, well, my goodness, they all knew each other, then
Yeah.
they worked with each other later, George Osborne and David Cameron, and they're all sitting there, even if they're with long hair, they're all
Yeah.
there. And that's where
Exactly.
those kind of networks are formed. It's a very networky place. I would say that I'm not an average Etonian by any means, but if I run into an Etonian for some reason, I remember when Cecil Beaton's house was being sold, the man at Christie's was an Etonian. We were never particularly close friends at school, but we had lunch together. We spoke the same language. We knew exactly how to interrelate with each other, so that's what they call the old boy network.
Yeah. I saw somebody talking about like worth it, not worth it, yacht, not worth it. Private school, worth it for the contacts, if anything, worth it for the connections that you develop through. And I thought
Yeah.
about Eton when I watched that video.
Yeah.
Has Eton successfully adapted to the modern world while preserving its traditions as you've watched this evolution over the years?
Very much so, and I perhaps ought to mention that there's a lot of volunteer work that is done by Eton as well, for African countries and for deprived areas and things like that. There's a lot of work of that nature. So it's always looking out from its privileged background. And of course, yeah, it changes the whole time. I mean, it has to, and it adapts. One of the problems that all those schools have got is that the present Labour government is trying to turn them from being charities, so that, it's very, very expensive now, unless you have a scholarship, although I didn't have a scholarship, but there are a lot of scholarships that can be, people have left money for specific purposes. And
Mhm.
so a lot of the boys are being, there again, you don't know who's paying, you don't know who isn't paying, you know?
Right, right. That is interesting. Will social media make Georgia's school years more difficult than they were for Prince William? Because, like you said, there were some rules and guidelines that everyone respected, especially after the death of Princess Diana. They left the boys alone. Prince William was free to walk up and down and see the Queen and learn all of his lessons about the monarchy and the history of the family. But we're in a we're in a different ecosystem now where everybody's a paparazzi.
But that, I think that would go right across the board, don't you, at whatever school he went to, not just
Mhm.
Eton. I'm
Yeah,
afraid, social media, the amount of time people spend on their phones takes them away from reading in the way that people used to, because, you just didn't have those things. At a certain age, you could have a gramophone in your room, you could play records, but not when you were a junior boy.
yeah.
And reading was a big part of growing up, and good part of our education, with very, very good school library, every possible book in it. And sometimes you opened the front of the book and found it had been given by some figure's name you recognized.
Oh, how neat. I bet that's so enchanting. When historians look back at Prince George's life, could his years at Eton prove to be one of the most formative periods of his development as a future king? And if you think so, based on your experience there, why?
I do think so. Again, I guess it would be sort of the case at any school at that age, because the age from 12 to 18 is a very crucial and very important time. Um, I think, yeah, I think he will, he'll be a different little chap when he comes out, at the other end. He'll be all grown up, he'll have confidence, and he'll be ready to talk to us in a way that we haven't seen at this point. I mean, we were allowed to meet Prince Charles when he was about 18, maybe actually even no, even older, nearly 21, when he did those interviews just before the investiture in 1969. Before that, we'd never really heard him speak, and suddenly we got his rather engaging personality. Jack DeManio on the Radio 4 interviewed him, and he said to him at the beginning, because the interview took place at Buckingham Palace, would you just tell the listeners what you said to me? And Prince Charles said that he asked him, did you have any difficulty finding this place? And you realize he's got a good sense of humor.
I wanted to ask you, in case the audience hasn't heard this story before, can you talk to me about what was your reaction in meeting Queen Elizabeth for the first time inside of St. George's Chapel? You'd been a tour guide. You obviously admired the British royal family and had pictures of them on your wall. Had you prepared yourself for it, or were you still smitten when you stumbled upon her?
Well, I didn't know it was going to happen when
Yeah.
I went up there. I just went up there for a regular Sunday, and I was told that, to be on a certain door to open it for her, because they were building the little chapel, which is where they're all buried now, and she was coming to look at it. And so she just, I was planted on my door, and she just came round the corner with Prince Edward held by the hand in a little blue coat. And there she was, no one to introduce us, and she spoke to me. And actually, she asked me if I was a chapel guide, and I had a thing on me saying chapel guide, so she was onto a bit of a winner there. Then that's all she said. And then the Queen Mother came round the corner a second later, hand outstretched, and said, "And who are you?"
Oh,
I said, "I'm Hugo Vickers, ma'am." And she said, "Oh, yes." And of course, that was a Queen Mother trick. But of course, I thought, goodness,
she's
she's
heard of me.
exactly, she's been waiting to meet me all this time. Maybe the Dean has told her that, one day we would meet.
So cute.
No way. Just her way of making a 16-year-old happy, you know.
Oh.
But to get the two of them together in that extraordinary way was rather remarkable.
It was. It was. It's such a sweet story. All right. Well, Hugo, thank you so much for giving us an Eton breakdown today. I thought it was an awfully fun conversation, and it sounds like Prince George has a lot to look forward to. And we aren't going to violate his privacy here at Kinsey Schofield Unfiltered. We want him to have his sweet little fun and freedom. But I do think it's interesting, if you're curious to know what life at Eton might be like over the next few years for Prince George, who has officially announced that that's where he's headed. This was a nice little conversation about what he might be able to expect. So, Hugo, thank you for your knowledge on the subject. You're knowledgeable about so many things. Well, agree with us, disagree with us. Let us know in the comments below. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video with a friend. And please jump on Amazon or head to your local bookstore, look up Hugo Vickers and support my friends. I would greatly appreciate that. Hugo, I look forward to, hopefully I see you again soon. I think I see you in like 2 weeks.
Good.
All right. All
Great.
right. I look forward to seeing you then. Bye, everyone.